Hello, once again you see my brutally swollen face in the lens, nimboed by a halo, so to speak. Let's see, I could probably look at myself through the viewfinder as I do this, if I had the technological know-how to detach the microphone from its little stand here. Anyway, this is the wrong hero, and what you are viewing is the 24th installment of the epic political material called, well, I don't have a collective title for it, so in the future when they assign ISBN numbers to this data, we will have to simply refer to it as individual units until I come up with a collective title. I guess we could call the whole thing cruel and unusual, perhaps, but in any event, and if we do call it that, then it'll be given its own ISBN number. But for now, this episode is called Slick, and we're still dealing, of course, with the aftermath of the presidential elections, but right now we're in about early August, the silly season, when nothing happens, and so all those little curiosity factor type stories get exposure in the news, which otherwise might not be given any sort of media coverage whatsoever. For example, the Berkeley City Council boycotts all major gasoline suppliers. This came out in late July, and it occurs to me that I need a red pen. Because if we're talking Berkeley, and you know a red pen is the most appropriate medium by which to annotate each and every one of these wonderful, wonderful little tidbits. Colonel Sanders looks different in Canada, by the way, and if you don't believe me, you can look it up in www.toymuseum.com. I wonder how he looks different. Probably eating a raw fish head. Well, let us not unduly slur our fine Canadian neighbors. Could this video be any more amateurish than it is? I mean, blocking the screen with my bulky visage is bad enough, but blocking it with my bulky torso is perhaps even more of a video no-no. However, this gives you the opportunity to examine every single pore of my face and gaze ye upon my visage. Now it's interesting, just before Halloween there was an episode of The Simpsons in which as far as I know was never shown when it was originally intended to have been shown, at least not in my area. Aliens take over the bodies of President Clinton and Challenger Bob Dole, and that's interesting because it was the same idea I had about an alien vice president who is almost elected to the presidency, or who is elected to the presidency. And then on Saturday Night Live 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, there was this thing about the super presidents or something, and that, again, that's the same idea I've discussed, and I don't know what's going on here. I should stop talking to my Hollywood contacts, because I have a feeling that some of my ideas are being appropriated and, worse, watered down. Well, I read something interesting which I can't quote verbatim because I don't have it in front of me, but the essence of it was that it was Joyce Carol Oates in the New York Review of Books from November 6th or something, and in it she says that literary archetypes have to be geared towards a more simple-minded audience in order to stick as archetypes. So the archetype of the murderous child, for example, never really caught hold with The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, but it did catch hold with William March's The Bad Seed, which I think we discussed a few weeks ago. So I was queerly prescient, so to speak. In any event, additionally, there was an essay, a very interesting essay on Chekhov, which I spent a good 45 minutes poring over last night. Hence, every hour I spend doing something other than these videos is an hour that means fewer videos are produced, so I'm very reluctant. Is this thing on autofocus? Yes, it is. So the little camera is going to keep twitching from time to time. And as I thrust my face up here, it should automatically adjust itself so. I don't even know if my full face is in the screen. I mean, the other thing I have to go on is my reflection in the lens. It would be kind of tragic if my entire visage were not, in fact, leering at you, but only some small portion of it. Anyway, on Gingrich, every 6 months or so, Gingrich insists that he learned his lesson, but he never does. This, according to David Brooks, quoted in where else? Newsweek. The speaker has built a culture, Newt world, around himself, a cult of personality that subjects the business of the House to the whims and overthinking of one man. The rules of Newt world mean that the next crisis cannot be far off, and the next crisis may be the speaker's last. Prescient words, for a mere few weeks later, Newt was challenged for the speakership. In Newt world, everyone has to assume that Newt Gingrich is a figure of world historical significance. He's not just some guy with management theories. He's a tactician along the lines of Wellington. That's what I like about Newsweek. Every so often they throw one of these little curveballs in there. A memo that Newt Gingrich wrote to himself in 1992 captures the scale of his imagination. Gingrich, primary mission, advocate of civilization, right, definer of civilization, teacher of the rules of civilization, leader, possibly, of the civilizing forces. Recently, Newt sent around a memo wargaming the elections of 2016. I'm not even that far in the future. Well, let's see. Presumably, Gore will be elected. And serving out an 8-year term. I don't think that these scandals are going to amount to much. Gephardt's challenge to him will not amount to much. By the year 2008, Gephardt will probably not be in the picture, and some younger challenger, maybe someone like John Kasich, will have his shot against whoever Gore's appointed successor is. Now, Gephardt really screwed things up. If he had just played softball with Gore, there might be a chance that Gore would select him as his VP, and he'd be next in line, even though he'd probably be pretty old by the time 2008 rolled around. Maybe Hillary will run in 2008. Now, I think that eventually John Kasich is going to be our president. I don't think this talk about Elizabeth Dole is going to really go much of anywhere, but then again, you never know. But there is an innate prejudice against electing women as President of the United States. It may be severely less than it was in, say, 1920 when women first gained the vote, but nevertheless, I'm not sure that we've advanced all that far in 80 years. I mean, I'd be happy to vote for a female president if her politics were suitable to me. I mean, the English, I mean, they're so advanced, you know. They elected Maggie Thatcher almost 20 years ago. Anyway, back to Newt. People in Newt world have to be devoted to Newt in public and sacrifice independent thought for the good of the movement. This makes for hypercharged relationships that inevitably run aground. Most of the time, Newt tries to be a good manager and let others lead. But periodically, his great visionary side will take over, and he'll insert himself into house business. The country needs more big thinkers like Newt, but he's wrong for this job at this time. Gingrich's colleagues might do well to liberate him from his duties as Speaker and let him turn Newt World into a full-time forum for vision and meditation. Wow, you know, that's a real softball way of saying that Newt ought to quit, hey? Like, well, you know, he's a very good man and all, but quite frankly, the little fellow's kind of overstayed his welcome, much like The Wrong Hero, incidentally. And so, let's see, we're only 10 minutes into this. That means I got another hour and 50 minutes, and I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. No, that's not true. I have plenty of ideas about what to talk about. But Helms and Weld, says Evan Thomas. Remember that whole flap? Again, the silly season, August, not much is happening, so the fact that Jesse Helms blocked Weld's nomination to the ambassadorship of Mexico because he was soft on drugs. Well, Helms might have had a point. You never know. The Canadian ambassador to Mexico declared Mexico's drug policies a joke. Clearly, you need someone like Bill Bennett at the helm. Ineffectual drug warrior Bill Bennett He'd be the ideal ambassador to Mexico, even though he speaks not one word of Spanish. Then again, I'm not sure Weld spoke any Spanish either. Maybe Mike Dukakis. Hey, now we're talking. Put Mike Dukakis down here. Now, we all know that he speaks fluent Spanish, along with presumably Greek and English. And, you know, Kitty could use a little vacation down in sunny Mexico. Just don't send her down to Acapulco where that hurricane destroyed most of the tourist industry. Helms and Weld stand on opposite sides of a sociological and ideological divide. Wall Street versus Main Street, mink coat versus cloth coat, Eastern establishment versus Sunbelt. Now, it's interesting because, you know, when you think about it, Nixon and his opponent, John F. Kennedy, also stood on, opposite sides of the same ideological divide. Now, in '52, Nixon said that his wife didn't wear a mink, referring to the Truman scandals, the mink coat and freezer scandals, the vicuna coat and freezer scandals of the Truman administration circa 1950-51. My wife doesn't wear a mink coat, but she wears a good Republican cloth coat. Come off it. Anyway, that's what that reference seems to be in reference to. Wall Street versus Main Street. That's what they said about, what was it, Tom Dewey, the unsuccessful challenger in 1944 and 48, that he was nothing more than a barefoot boy from Wall Street. No, maybe they were talking about Wilkie. Well, in any event, yeah, I think it was Wilkie they were referring to, the unsuccessful 1940 challenger, who later went from isolationism to internationalism. Nothing like being, a convert to the conventional wisdom, being the prodigal son to make you insanely popular. Well, Reagan was a Democrat, but eventually he listened to Nancy Reagan's father, the good doctor, Dr. Davis, or whatever his name was, and he switched over to the Republican camp, and we all love him now. In our society, says Aikich Ukwu Ibenigbu in Time magazine of the same week, August 4th, in our society it has become clear that the opposite of courage is not cowardice, but conformity. Good point, Ike Chukwu. With a name like that, I mean, you would think that conformity would be, maybe they call him Ike for short or something, I don't know. Life in Washington, says Newt Gingrich, is a little like living in a large extended family where every time two people start arguing over which cookies to bake, it becomes divorce imminent. And it's sort of this hyperbolic exaggeration, says Newt, the self-serving. Well, did you know, another one of those interesting facts that only comes out in August, even though I know it's November now. I'm running behind. August, September, October, so I'm 3 months behind here. But I'm going to catch up, I swear. I'm going to roar through this thing. I'm not going to do any side commentary, and pretty soon I'll be within shooting distance of September, which presumably would be all to the good. 13 states have vegetable libel laws. Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Arizona, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Idaho. The 13 perhaps most reactionary states in the Union, incidentally. Well, I don't know about North and South Dakota. It would be unfair to tar them with that brush, but, I mean, they don't got much going on there, quite frankly. I mean, what have they ever produced? George McGovern, that was their big thing. Well, let's see. Paula Burns, Senior Master Sergeant, says about the new Army, we're no longer the charge the beach, stogie in the mouth, cussing, hard-drinking, woman-chasing World War II guy. The more technically advanced we get, the less overtly brutal we need to be. Geez, well, that's nice. You can be covertly brutal instead. And that's a thing called cool, or as young children say, cool. 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 Well, let's see. I saw this, speaking of the Army, I read this wonderful book called See Paris and Die, Brutality in the U.S. Marines by H. Paul Jeffers and Dick Levitan. It's a pretty interesting book. Um, it talks about that incident in 1957 where the drill sergeant led his recruits into some swamp and a few of them drowned. And the Paris in the title refers to Parris, Paris Island, in South Carolina, I believe. The sharpest criticism often goes hand in hand with the greatest idealism and love of country, said RFK. Ours is the age of the individual, and there is no one who does not wish to see his name on the wall, said Paul Berman. Modern life sneers at selflessness. What gives satisfaction today is the contributions that are signed, the bylined contributions, the contributions that lead to the name on the wall. When am I going to be in the Boston Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, by the way? Probably never, because I write an unsigned column by the pseudonymous Butch and Brenda in The Noise, as well as my own column, in which I heap opprobrium upon everybody in the Boston rock and roll scene. But it hasn't. My contract has not yet been canceled, so apparently it's criticism that is well taken. Gingrich's tendency toward free-range cogitation has always mystified his straight and narrow colleagues. It was tolerated at first because he was such a brilliant partisan. These days, his history of unscheduled policy flights is seen as evidence that he always was a little weird, says Joe Klein. Newt's majority leadership team never seemed entirely at ease with power. They were guerrillas who had won the lottery, a far cry from the staid, careerist Democrats who had run the House for 40 years and had stubbornly needed microscopic concessions from a series of Republican presidents. Authorizers decide how much money the government should spend, and tend to be more ideological. Appropriators decide specifically how the money will be given out, and they tend to be more pragmatic, the insiders. So we have the Republican authorizers in the appropriations role, and their instinct seems to be not to appropriate any money if humanly possible not to. Like that profile? I don't know which profile's better. He's brilliant, says Bill Paxson. He's not 6 moves ahead of you, he's 6 chessboards ahead of you. He's a great strategist and visionary, which presumably is why he was teaching at South Georgia's Community College instead of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Brown, or even UMass Boston, or Boston University. Hey, what's up with Boston University anyway, huh? All that stuff about handicapped ramps and access to, handicapped people given extra time to take tests and stuff, and they seem to think this is a bad thing, and I don't know why. Oh yes, and then on the other end of the extreme, there's all the people who are protesting over the forthcoming Mr. Magoo movie, because Mr. Magoo is a hard-of-seeing man, a visually impaired man, and visually impaired advocates seem to fear that Magoo will send the wrong message to the nation's impressionable youth, if they even bother to turn out to the theaters to see this thing, which I have a feeling somehow it's going to be maybe not quite as bad as Sergeant Bilko, or McHale's Navy, or even, oh God, the worst, Car 54, Where Are You? That must have went straight to video. What an awful, awful movie. But it might not be quite as bad as that, but it's not going to reach even the heights of, say, The Saint. That's my impression, or Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible wasn't that bad. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that great, but what do you expect? I mean, it's the sort of program when it originally aired that appealed to bright 12-year-olds at best, and I don't know. His revolution slips, as all revolutions do, back towards the mean, says, why, it must have been Joe Klein. Tell him he's dealing with the big boys now, says Fat Tony Salerno to Gravano, cited by Jeffrey Tubin. I love the names of mobsters. Too bad that, our nation's congressmen would be much more colorful if they had names like Fat Newt Gingrich or Meatballs Bill Paxson or, I don't know, Squint Bill Clinton or Al Rooster Gore or Jesse Baldy Helms or Bill Cakes Weld or Hillary Hot Dogs Clinton or Alphonse Little Al D'Amato. Just a thought, a wayward thought. I'm sorry this is not at the usual high level of ratiocination, which the wrong hero is justly ignored because of. Yep. Here we go, the New Republic double issue of August 11th and 18th. Always a reliable source of scraping the bottom of the barrel for political news which is remotely of interest. The left is not nowhere, it is, in a bland and vague way, everywhere, says Michael Kelly. And of course, the pundits are like leaping all over this Newt Gingrich thing at this time. Trainwreck 2. Deja coup, says Stephen Glass. For the first time since he became Speaker in 1994, Gingrich desperately needs Democrats. There's a movie title for you. Desperately Needing Democrats. Both sides are already well into the duel of fiscal chicken. Excuse me, I must have breathed a hairball. Ah. Look at the line. Now, some may characterize this programming as the wrong hero self-indulgently emptying the wastebasket of his mind, but it's not true. Actually, the wrong hero is emptying the dumpster of his mind. I'm sorry I have to speak from notes. It must seem dreadfully unprofessional. But, well, I can't possibly keep all this stuff in my head. An old story of immigration. The Americanizing rebellion of the second generation, the doomed intransigence of the first. Yep, it's the oldest story in the book. Yes, sir. It's easy to feel suspicious in this age of nascent tribalism of any ethnically insular institution, like, perhaps, Yale? The Yale Five. 5 Jewish students who don't want to be in mixed-sex dorms because it violates their religious principles. Oh, there's a wasp. How nice. I don't mean a Bill Weld, I mean like an insect. And he's coming straight at me. Jesus Christ, where are all these insects coming from? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to deal with this situation. So, I will put up the template of the wrong hero in his unmasked identity while I see if I can't dash around and kill this insect. Just so you have something to look at, mind ye. This is going to screw everything up, I'm already running pretty late. There we go. That's me on my summer vacation with my old pal, Mr. Peanut. As you can see, I'm sort of voguing. Uh-oh, that was a bad mistake. Quick, bring back the light. The light. Uh-oh. You know what? That was not a good move, because, once this delicate camera no longer has adequate light, it begins acting in the most contrary way. Now what I have to do is this is like jiggling a toilet handle. I don't know why this should work. According to all the known laws of physics, it should not, but it does. See? Now we've got a picture back. It is perhaps not the best picture. Anyway, where is that damn wasp? Yeah, I feel like Jesse Helms right now. Where is that damn wasp? Is he on top of the circular fan blade? You know, I can't have this wasp flying around. My girlfriend will be like furious, right, when she comes in and she'll see this wasp and like she'll start screaming and yelping in that adorable way of hers, and it just won't do. I gotta get this wasp, but of course now it's gone naturally. Well, I'm sure the second I sit back down again, the wasp will reappear. Well, in a way this is fortunate. It gives me a much needed opportunity to slam down some scarifying Java in the strength which the wrong hero requires in order to merely get up in the morning. Now here's something interesting. If you leave orange juice out, and then you open the plastic container, there's the wasp, see it? It makes the same sort of hissing noise that a nearly empty gas tank will make when you remove the cap. I'm going to get this wasp. Here's a real snuff film for you. You're going to see a living creature go to its death. Now, you know, I can't resume this until I get that wasp. Sorry. I mean, I'm as much a Buddhist as the next man, but I can't. I hear it buzzing around. I can't have this wasp right behind my head. What if it takes umbrage at something I say and decides to sting me? Where the hell is it? I hear it buzzing. This is ridiculous. You know, if I had left myself adequate time to do this, then I could turn the camera off. Oh, it's down behind the bookshelf. I'm not going to be able to get at it. This bookshelf weighs about 50 tons. And, well, I hear it buzzing around down there. You would think that it would, like, want to be near the light, but apparently not. Come on, you. Like it can hear me. Perhaps it was attracted to the sound of my voice. I thought that the painters destroyed that wasp's nest. Apparently a few recalcitrant beasts managed to escape their termination at the hands of the ruthless painters. Well, nothing to be done. I've got to carry on under the threat of the wasp of Damocles, so to speak, and nothing to be done, I guess. So sorry, boss. All right, that was not a politically correct thing to say. You were mocking Oriental Americans. So, speaking of political correctitude, immigrant enclaves have been like comfort stations on the road to assimilation. The places where you learn from your own kind about the new kind you were bound to become. How interesting. Those Americans, they're suckers. Yeah. They don't like to dicker or bargain like we do in the old country. They just want to pay one price. And the price they pay is usually too high. Isn't that something? Whatever price you pay, it's always too high. There's a real philosophy for the Nietzschean 21st century. You know, I hate to say it, but Nietzsche had it all down, man. Can you imagine Nietzsche in prison? Whatever does not kill me makes me stronger. Wham, you know? It's like, douche. Okay, pal. Okay, Dutchie. Boom. Bend over, Dutchie. So, pass the Dutchie, they'd say to one another, as Nietzsche goes down the line. Anyway, that was tasteless. wrong hero has never been known for his compassionate worldview, now has he? We're talking now. I just ran into Bert Kranke, who runs AS220 and will be participating in the death of the Cabaret of the Oddly Normal. And his wife suggested that we stage the death of the wrong hero. Might not be such a bad idea, but then the wrong hero would live on forever in residual reruns. And I don't know if killing off the wrong hero is such a good idea, particularly since I'm the wrong hero. I'm very flattered, though, that some would think that the wrong hero is even worthy of death. She should have said the assassination of the wrong hero, because, of course, you know, the wrong hero is fast becoming a political figure. Yeah, I was thinking of making the run for City Hall, but my boy on the art council there, whatever his name is, he's doing a pretty good job of representing me, being totally impractical. Wow, I have a copy of The Public Burning here by Robert Coover. Now, in all the talk about Underworld by Don DeLillo, not one reviewer has seen fit to mention an interesting parallel text. Iron butt gets smeared again. I left the president out on Harry's balcony, delivering to the sunburnt and straw-hatted crowds below his statement declining to intervene on behalf of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, to return to my office, taking as circuitous a route out of the White House as I thought I could get away with. When was the general ever going to show me around the place, I wondered. What I'd been allowed to see of the White House I'd liked. It was roomy and comfortable, if maybe too public, and it had a lot of interesting corners. I especially liked the Lincoln sitting room. There was an old chair I had that would look good in there. I'd never been up to the solarium where Ike held his stag parties, but I hoped it was like my bell tower back in Whittier, only fancier. Familiar sight in the spring. The man of destiny out there in his white sports shirt, tan cap, and gray slacks, whopping golf balls around the grounds like popcorn, like snow-white Eisenhoppers, while his faithful old army sergeant, now his valet, chased about after them with a yellow bag, reminding old-timers of Woodrow Wilson's shepherd out on the White House pasture, gathering up sackfuls of scattered wool tufts and dung for the vegetable garden. Well, anyway, interesting. Of course, I haven't read all of Underworld yet, so perhaps it would not be proper at this time to draw parallels between the two texts. And, in fact, The Public Burning is specifically about the 1952-53 era. And Underworld by Don DeLillo ranges all over the map, and Coover hasn't really done very good after The Public Burning. I mean, that was his big thing. I mean, he had the Universal Baseball Association, which was a good book. Anyway, back to assimilation, and that wasp is still around here. Latinos, by the second and third generation, already look more like Italians than like African Americans, says Peter Beinart. Geez, I wasn't aware of this, but see, I'm Italian. I don't recall. Well, in any event, I think he doesn't mean this literally, physically. Jews and Latinos are stranded together in a fiscally conservative, culturally cosmopolitan, political no man's land. And they are a large part of the reason that growing numbers of candidates who are themselves ideologically stranded between the two parties, Christie Whitman, Reardon, Edgar, have in recent years been elected. Well, anyway, so much for that. Yes, the New Republic can always be counted on to make these gross generalizations about entire ethnic groups. That's kind of what I like about it. Well, I think I'll join Alcoholics Unanimous. How does that sound? Or perhaps I'll participate in the Mafia Talent Show. That's what I should do for my final appearance as in the cabaret of the Oddly Normal. Hey, by the way, this might be a good time for me to solicit business. Does anybody have a Friday night venue which they would like to see the wrong hero at? Contact me, the wrong hero, care of this station. I'm sure at some point the good people at CCTV will get back to me concerning my fan mail, such as it is. I've got like one fan in all the world. And even he's getting sick of me. Hi, Don. Is it something about the fractious time we live in that makes us want to have our dead heroes live up to our contemporary prejudices? That's a very good quote. Daniel Shore said it in The New Leader from June 30th. Now, The New Leader has a circulation of like, I don't know, 20,000 at best. But they've got all the best writers, and they're enormously influential in certain circles. And if you ever want to see a copy of The New Leader, go down to the John F. Kennedy School of Government Library in Harvard Square, which is the only place I know of locally which keeps back issues of The New Leader. It's a pretty thin journal. I mean, it never seems to have more than 32 pages or so. But it's just densely packed with all sorts of useful knowledge. Although not every issue is as good as every other issue. But usually there's 2 or 3 pretty good nuggets in there, and sometimes it'll take an entire afternoon to sift through it. Well, anyway, for example, the New Leader from June 30th has this lengthy quote from David Reisman. Why should politicians who directly peak and sometimes make good use of power be disparaged in contrast to those who seek power by accumulating wealth, or by entering academia or journalism? The venial sins of politicians, thanks to the polemical context, are made more visible, feeding the extravagant cynicism of the general public. That's right. You know, if politicians are dirty, no-good rats, why should we give them a hard time about it? How ought we to dance? How ought we dance to bossa nova? March in place and swivel your hips. That's Brazilian ideology in a nutshell. Denied any possibility of effecting social reform through politics, Brazilians in the late 1950s compensated. En masse, they discovered bohemianism, which substitutes aesthetics for politics. This was in Pulse, the giveaway magazine of the Tower Records chain, in August of 1997. Now that's going to be you ought to save your old copies of Pulse, because that's going to be a hard thing to come by in the years to come. I mean, what library do you suppose has back issues of Pulse? Very few would be my guess. And for that matter, what libraries in the country, probably fewer than 100, have the book Rants and Incendiary Tracts, Voices of Desperate Illumination, 1558 to Present, edited by Bob Black and Adam Parfrey? Now, being an interlibrary loan librarian, I'm able to get these esoteric books, but not everyone is. You have to buy it. He who desires but acts not, it says on page 7, breeds pestilence. Always be ready to speak your mind, and a base man will avoid you, says William Blake in Proverbs of Hell. If to kill is always a crime, then it is forbidden equally to all. If it is not a crime, then it is permitted equally to all, says Karl Heinzen in the essay Murder, published in 1849. Octave Mirabeau, in 1888, was quoted as saying, "Sheep, at least, never vote for the butcher who kills them or the bourgeois who eats them. More beastly than any beast, the voter names his own executioner and chooses his own devourer. And for this precious right, he fought a revolution. They will tell you, Schopenhauer and Nordau, that politics is an abominable lie, opposed to all common sense, justice, and right, and that meddling in it will gain you no credit. Remember that he who solicits your vote is by that very fact revealed as a scoundrel, since in exchange for your advantage and fortune he promises a cornucopia of marvels he'll never deliver, because he hasn't the power to deliver them. The man you elect represents neither your misery nor your aspirations, nor anything of yours, but rather his own passions and interests, which are opposed to yours. Hey, but at least you get to elect them, right? Whereas you don't get to elect a banker or a professor or a journalist, right? I mean, yeah, that's getting back to that other quote there. Who said that other thing? That was well, it was our old pal David Reisman. Smug sentimentality is so satisfying. Sentimentality is comfortable and therefore demeaning. Sentiment is a creature of fashion. Lust is eternal, said Valentine de Saint-Point in Manifesto of Lust, 1913. I wrote a manifesto because I have nothing to say. Literature exists but in the heart of imbeciles. It is absurd to divide writers into good and bad. On one side there are my friends, and on the other side the rest, says Philippe Soupault in Literature and the Rest. And this might very well apply to politics as well. Sort of somehow trying to get this back into politics. There are souls predestined for poison in whatever form. There are souls that are incurable and lost to the rest of society. Deprive them of one means of folly, they will invent 10,000 others. They will create wilder, subtler methods, methods that are absolutely desperate. Nature herself is fundamentally anti-social. It is only by a usurpation of powers that the organized body of society opposes the natural inclination of humanity, says André Breton in the essay General Security, the Liquidation of Opium, written in 1825. That's a pretty convincing argument for the legalization of drugs, if I ever heard one, to tell you the truth. Politics, says Emmett Grogan, is an arena where words are juggled in a gigantic hoax. There is a great deal to be silent about, written in 1967. I hate complainers, says Anton LaVey in Misanthropia, published in 1977. Nobody gives a shit about anyone else's grievances. When one caterwauls his troubles to another, it simply weakens the complainer in the listener's eyes. Far better to arouse further antagonism by disappointing your detractors by your refusal to display unease. I refuse to sicken because it will make my enemies healthier. I refuse to break off relations with any worthwhile companion because if I did it, it would make others' loneliness more bearable. I refuse my sorrow to be known, for sorrow is another joy. I even dislike showing wrath, for to one who receives little attention, my wrath would brighten his heart. Yeah, that Anton LaVey, him and Nietzsche, I mean, what can you say? By the way, there is this fascinating Polish artist named Stanislaw Zukalski, but his works are almost impossible to come by in this country. And again, I had to spend $10 just to get his stuff from the University of Virginia, and it wasn't even his most famous work. It was his earliest works, which were interesting to look at. He was a very talented man, but unfortunately, well, unfortunately, his best work is not really available to us. Well, here's something Bob Black says. The satirist is someone condemned to be misunderstood, especially by his friends. Uniquely, he achieves greatness through the self-surpassing enormity of his own pettiness. He succeeds in the measure he persuades us that his enemies are not worth the trouble. But if the satirist didn't think he was better than his enemies, he wouldn't belittle them, as he always does. In his satiric capacity, he doesn't hate. He despises. He hasn't the time to wait for a worthy foe. Everywhere he looks, somebody is getting away with something. Each in himself is not worth the trouble, but each as an instance of a type, as a concrete universal, is the only thing worth troubling. And the target, however paltry, is real. The satirist's opposite number is the theologian. For any fully realized satirist, the best telescope is a microscope, and he sees and draws things literally in black and white. He mocks trendiness and imposture. Gossipy as Aristophanes or Swift. He names names because evil is incarnate or it is nothing. The satirist's crowning glory is to rescue his victims from oblivion. Again, Bob Black on John Crawford. Now here's something that Hakeem Bey says in his essay, Intellectual S&M, published in 1988. We live in a society which advertises its costliest commodities with images of death and destruction, beaming them direct to the reptilian backbrain of millions through alpha wave generating carcinogenic reality warping devices. It takes no guts at all to be an art sadist, for salacious death lies at the aesthetic center of our consensus paradigm. Such artists are nothing but police without power, a perfect definition of many revolutionaries, too. Right on. And, in addition to all this heady reading, what should I go to but Gershon Legman's Love and Death, in which he says pretty much the same thing as Hakeem Bey said in 1988, only he says it in 1950. Where institutionalized violence appears in history, it is as the last resort of bankrupt civilizations, sick and reeling unto death. Does anyone notice that in radio and television we now see happening what was sworn would never happen? Fantasy bloodlust spilling over into fact with prize fights, wrestling matches, football and ice hockey. Once rough competitions, now holocausts of berserk bone crunching, while televised millions wet their pants. Authors thrown to critics, contests in abuse and blatherskite under the name of comedy, spot news broadcasts from the foot of the electric chair, paid sadistic quizmasters cracking the whip over fumbling quizzees, their trash-filled brains reeling between avarice and insult, audience humiliation programs under the guise of confessionals and giveaways, capitalizing on mayhem and sadomasochism to the nth degree, with the payoff to the victims in refrigerators. He was referring to Queen for a Day, but that's very apropos of many of the talk shows of the 80s and 90s. He is a writer. He is Prometheus. His is the guardianship of light. But fear infects him, and from leader light-bearer he has fallen away to jester and dishonorable jape. Truth is falsified. Falseness is made more false. Darkness dissipated not at all by his flameless flare. This, is actually a magnificent book, and I would highly recommend it to virtually anybody interested in commentary or a social critique of America. It's called Love and Death. It's by Gershon Legman. I believe it was published in 1950, but many libraries have it, particularly larger academic libraries. Of course, Gershon Legman is the same man who also wrote, let me track this out, it's directly at hand, The Rationale of the Dirty Joke, an Analysis of Sexual Humor. This is Volume 1. Volume 2 appears to be only available in hardcover. And collectively, the two-volume set is published under the title No Laughing Matter. Now, Harvard's Widener Library has the two-volume set. I made a photocopy of Volume 2, so I would always have it at hand. but I did spend a good 3 months going through volumes 1 and 2. A fascinating book. You can open it at virtually any page and find incredible insights. I was very lucky to find this book. It's not particularly easy to come by. God. Ernest Jones, in his often rewritten Hamlet and Oedipus, 1910-49, a work which does not in any edition acknowledge its great debt to Otto Rank's chapter on Shakespeare in his Incest Motif, 1912, explains that the excess of vilification against Ophelia is so wholly out of proportion to her own offense, because in reviling her, Hamlet is really expressing his bitter resentment against his mother. What seems to be overlooked here is the basis of his resentment against his mother, which is nothing other than the projection upon her as the dominant and seductive older female of the sexual desire he himself feels. In a critique of Freud's interpretation of Hamlet, Dr. Frederick Werdum points out the needlessness of invariably hypothesizing an inverted Oedipus complex, which drives the boy to reject his mother out of fear of his father's strength, and indicates the reservoir of hostility that can exist against the actually dominant mother in matriarchy, or in the mother-dominated family. I'm getting way off the course here. There was something about Ophelia's nothing, Ophelia's crime. Well, in any event, you want to read the chapter in Volume 1 called Ophelia's Crime. It has some very interesting things in it. Having buffooned it, Gershon Legman goes on in Love and Death, to the end of the censorship tether, the only recourse for both artist and audience is transvaluation, displacement, the siphoning off of the suppressible urge for expression elsewhere. The only thing short of total sublimation that can replace sex, except sadism. It is complete in itself. It can dispense with all earthly relation to sex, can dispense even with orgasm, thus allowing its adherents publicly to preen themselves on the purity of their ruthless delights. Transvaluation. Unfortunately, we believe in our mythologies instead of using them, a disastrous and most dangerous situation. People do acquire sexual experience, find out that they have been stuffed with lies, that it is no such lasting ecstasy and final solution that art would lead us to suppose, and then they are ready for the other half of our myth, violence, cited in Geoffrey Gorber's Ballet and Encore, published 1936. Poe's great contribution has been the enheroing of the avenger instead of the criminal, and with this one significant sop to moral pose, literary murder becomes respectable. The reading public went on a century-long debauch of printed sadism to replace the sex so notoriously absent in Victorian literature. For weaker stomachs with a religious turn, the ghost story simultaneously served up masochist terrors. Thus, this technique of persistent sexual negation, every detail of ravishing female nudity, lascivious temperament, etc., can be gone into at any desired length, so long as the whole is purified and antisepticized by the hero's frigid rejection, talking still of the detective novel, as do the adult comic strips that respectabilize with an overlay of violence whatever hints of sexual love they must intrude. I think he's speaking specifically of strips which are no longer really in vogue, like Terry and the Pirates and Steve Canyon and Dick Tracy and whatnot. The commodity they are selling us is hatred. The acme of the bitch heroine's inevitable achievement is not sexual intercourse, but the dragging down of some man's deepest dream to shit on it. But why? Women have made and continue to make the tactical error of accepting the enemy's values. Instead of fantasizing himself replacing his father in his mother's arms, the homosexual fantasies himself as a woman replacing his mother in his father's arms, taking upon himself female clothing if he dares. Only in this way can his father's jealous anger be turned safely into love. For the more virile crypto-homosexual, the Oedipal conflict can be more direct. He can himself become soldier, boxer, bullfighter, or whatnot, and kill his father time after time, overcompensating his evasion of the real conflict and his endless repetition of the symbolic death. But the fearful denigration and rejection of the mother, and with her all women, is never given up. Well, and one of the last things in the book Love and Death by Gershon Legman is a quote from Montaigne from 1588. We bravely say kill, rob, betray, but that other we dare pronounce only between clenched teeth? Well, anyway, we've gotten way off the track here, but hopefully we can start talking a little bit about more local matters. In Newsweek, I was charmed to find the following quote from Thomas M. Finneran, the Massachusetts Speaker of the House. I wouldn't say Governor Paul Cellucci is bland, but for him, putting jimmies on vanilla ice cream would be exuberance personified, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if the autofocus function has something to do with this thing right here. See, I can't tell. I don't even know if I'm in the picture or not. I am the wrong hero. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. You're watching Cafe Cabaret on Cambridge Community Television. It is approximately 10:30. You are tuned to Channel 9. That's my public service announcement. Let's see, how much more do we have to go here? Quite a bit from the looks of it. So be it. Hey, I wonder if the thing is taping. Yeah, it looks like it is. See, my girlfriend gets really mad if I don't tape Channel 9 in Providence on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's All My Children. It's her favorite show. Well, at least she stopped watching Oprah and Rosie O'Donnell. Well, at least if she does watch it, she does not do so in my presence. Sometimes I think she gets home early enough to catch like the last 45 minutes so she doesn't have to offend me. I don't mind Oprah so much. I'm not that crazy about Ricky Lake, and I really hate Rosie O'Donnell. I don't know why, but I do. There's just something about Rosie O'Donnell which is so cringe-inducing. Of course, the same could be said about the wrong hero. I'm going to eat this banana, but not in your presence. You can look at this picture, this pretty picture. No, the question is, how do I keep talking when I'm eating a banana? Oh. think of it, no wonder I'm hungry. I haven't had any breakfast. I've been racing around trying to do this and that. I might have to run and pick up a computer. That would mean that I would not be able to finish this magnificent masterpiece today. But I would like to, even though I'm getting right down to the wire in terms of time. It's always this way. If I hadn't taken the dog home, I would have had an extra 5 or 10 minutes. As it is, how many alcoholics are ever bald, asks Hugh Rushton in Newsweek from August 11th. Oh, come on now. I'm sure there's plenty of bald alcoholics. All you bald alcoholics unanimous out there, let your voices be heard. Oh, and there's a very interesting website called www.learn2.com. Apparently it tells you how to do all this stuff. www.learn2.com. Check it out. Most people having a midlife crisis only cause trouble for their friends and family, but Bill Weld gets to take his out on the whole party, says the waspish George Stephanopoulos. I am the only member here who hasn't broken both arms by patting himself on the back, says Representative Pete Stark on the budget agreement in Congress. We talked about mostly where we're going, toward the future. He and I are both into that, you know, says Newt Gingrich about Bill Clinton. As I get on in years, I begin to think the more you debate social policy, the less social policy you get. Is there an inverse ratio between the amount of debate and the legislation that emerges? Asks Daniel Patrick Moynihan, whose daughter used to work at MIT. I don't know if she's still there, but if she is, hi. Combat is so terrifying that only a fully developed system of special inducements can push the troops forward, says Thomas Powers in The Atlantic of August 1997. You got to check out, what was it? Harper's from, I believe it's November of 97. Man, it's just full of great stuff. It's, no, wait a minute. Was it Harper's? Yeah, it was Harper's. It's either October or November of 97. It's got 8 hitherto unpublished stories by Chekhov. Well, this is weird. I have little check marks next to these things, and I don't remember having read them, but I must have, so I'll skip them. New Republic from August 11th. No, I'm sorry, National Review. The mad scientist pose of Dr. Kevorkian, a man who seeks to extinguish life, is a disgusting insult to mad scientist Americans who universally seek to create life, notes Eric Anderson. The two-step device. When the allegation is first made, denounce it as unsubstantiated by any proof, and when proof is eventually provided, scoff that the allegation is old news. A possible third step, demand that, since no news scandals have been proved lately, the hearings should be abandoned. Or as Dan Quayle puts it, win a few primaries and the image problems go away. Republicans are going to get their ears waxed in 1998 if they don't stand for anything. What does that mean exactly? Get their ears waxed? I mean, you know, they're going to get their butts reamed, perhaps. As Newt Gingrich says, there is a whole narrow block of activists who grew up in an anti-world. They get up every morning and they want to know, who did we punch today? And which arcane philosophical fight were we bold on? Gee, I don't know who the hell he's talking about there. I mean, it's a perfect description of the wrong hero, but virtually nobody else. Pataki, says William J. Stern in National Review, is a 9-to-5 governor, averse to the long hours and political single-mindedness necessary to bring about true change in New York. Now, the cause of anti-rent control is dead for a decade, and the state's Republican officials stand revealed as business-as-usual apparatchiks of the welfare state status quo. Michael Moore has threatened a libel suit against the online magazine Salon for an article calling him loud-mouthed, self-serving, and not funny. Presumably he's willing to admit to the first two, but not the charge of being not funny. Well, sir? Yeah, the New Republic is very fond of its National Review is very fond of stitching together Greek and Roman prefixes to create entirely new words, like paleo-kleptocrats. Presumably they're talking about the Roosevelt administration. The leader of a reformist populist party in a representative government must stay on the offensive to survive. He should not pick chaotic fights and need not eschew tactical compromises. But he must continue to make strategic advances across a broad front. Instead, Gingrich has narrowed the Republican agenda and adopted a defensive posture. He should not be surprised that troops without a mission will sometimes direct their energies against each other, says the editor of National Review. Prohibition is not a temperate policy, said Abraham Lincoln. The ex post facto law. Walter Olson in Reason magazine quoted this eloquent arraignment of such law by the Earl of Stafford in the 17th century as he was prosecuted for treason by the Puritans. Better to live under no law at all and conform ourselves the best we can to the arbitrary will of a master than fancy we have a law in which we can rely, and find at last that it can try us by maxims unheard of until the very moment of the prosecution. Well, as Katharine Hepburn says, you can have everything, but you can't have it all at the same time, revealing herself as not only a talented motion picture actress, but a budding physicist as well. That was the month in which Jimmy Stewart and Robert Mitchum both died. Terry Teachout says, my favorite Louis Armstrong anecdote concerns his audience with Pope Paul VI. The Pope asked Armstrong if he and his wife had children. No, Daddy, the trumpeter cheerfully replied, but we're still wailing. Well, now, this was in the New York Times book review of August 8th. Russell Banks says, despite our much heralded multiculturalism and our supposed delight in difference, we are subjected to the same set of infomercials in our day-to-day life as we are subjected to the same sort of infomercials in our day-to-day lives, the same pop values and icons, the same pre-digested versions of public events, and thus are a much more homogenized people than we have ever been. Right on. Literature, says Mario Vargas Llosa in the essay Literature is Fire, published in 1967, literature is a form of permanent insurrection. Its mission is to arouse, to disturb, to alarm, to keep men in a constant state of dissatisfaction with themselves. Dogma, censorship, and arbitrary acts are also mortal enemies of progress and human dignity. The road to truth is not always smooth and straight. As he grappled with complex political realities, He moved inexorably from a naive utopianism to a version of liberalism that involves a commitment to the free market and a passionate attachment to personal liberty. And that's interesting because it sort of leads back to what Chekhov had to say about literature being something of a subversive form. And I guess a few weeks down the road I'll get around to actually quoting what Chekhov said or what was said about what Chekhov represented. But if you don't want to wait that long, check out the current issue of the New York Review of Books from, I believe it's November 6th of 1997. Well, moving right along. Reading Isaiah Berlin, I have come to see clearly something I had intuited in a confused way, that real progress, which has withered or overthrown the barbarous practices and institutions that were the source of infinite suffering for man and has established more civilized relations and styles of life, has always been achieved through a partial, heterodox, and deformed application of social theories. That's a real mouthful, isn't it? Well, fortunately, Richard N. Haas has written a book called The United States, the Reluctant Sheriff. And you know, it's funny that news of this book should come out just when Jimmy Stewart passes away. Ah, Liberty Valance. Sheriff, I want you to arrest that man. Well, who is it? Liberty Valance. Liberty Valance? You didn't tell me it was Liberty Valance. I'm getting out of here. It's funny how all this stuff seems to work in conjunction. Infinite connections and an infinite amount of connectivity. San Francisco, says Time magazine in its issue of August 11th, America's most hypersensitive city has never been happy without a cause to embrace passionately, or at the very least, something to be ticked off about. San Francisco, you say? Sounds like Cambridge to me. Well, anyway, Mexicans, says Manuel Villamor Reyes, have been conditioned to believe that the government and the politicos who run it are all crooked because God, or the gods, will it. Frank S. Koppelman says, the soundbite has the potential to attract attention and elicit support. It is inadequate to the task of intellectual persuasion, the missing ingredient of modern public discourse. I'm trying my best to restore intellectual persuasion to modern political discourse, but I fear that I'm falling down the job. How long can I talk? Just continue talking without so much as stopping to take a breath before I finally grow so incredibly brain weary that I'm forced to have a total breakdown and cease my amiable yet aimless chattering. Michael Krantz says, the issue is whether pornography will get into the library. Our task is to protect our children. A more politically fireproof sentence has yet to be conceived by mortal man. Okay? So let's repeat this one as a mantra. Our task is to protect our children. Whose task? Damn it. I don't care what the kids see. Discipline your children. Make sure they don't see these things. Don't cut off my access to whatever it is I might want to see just because some kids might be corrupted. It's not my responsibility. I have nothing to do with it. It's not fair. Anyway, that's the way I really feel. Let the kids, yeah. In California, everything on the spectrum of undesirability, from minor annoyance to universal tragedy, is okay. Anything better to any degree, all the way up to a colossal lottery jackpot or the return of Jesus, that's neat. Yes, that's true. The Weekly Standard from August 11th. Budget reform passed with work to welfare minimum wage and benefits package provisos. So what? We know all that. Moderate State Department. Moderate is a... When the State Department says somebody is a moderate, it means that they have not yet been caught with a bomb. Bill Weld. Casual views toward political ethics, says the Boston Globe. Weld might also have an image problem. It's unlikely that his self-created persona, the patrician eccentric, would play as well in the rest of the country. Weld is widely considered something of a dilettante. While being rich and unserious might help him in Massachusetts, at least you never had to worry about Weld stealing anything, said Howie Carr. It is hard to imagine voters outside of New England electing a president who freely admits he's kind of lazy. He was bored with the minutiae of statehouse life. What really appeals to the average politician, appointing judges, a driver, cutting a deal by giving a job to some legislative chairman's nephew, these little day-to-day pleasures wore out pretty quickly for Weld. I think it amused him for a while, but he was always slumming, says Howie Carr. What if Bill Weld were to switch parties, get a cabinet post, cause Al Gore to come to realize that Bill Weld might make a pretty good running mate in 2000, if only for the charm he would bring to the ticket? Some Republicans are already talking the scenario through. Maybe America would be better off if Helms let Weld have Mexico City after all. Talk about wishful thinking. Even in the best of faith, we all, as responses to Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill showed, tend to break ties in favor of the home team, says Michael Baron. Helms won't respond to Weld's public fulminations. I'm staying out of it. The media, they want a feud, and they are for Weld. But it will serve no useful purpose to let them have one. I don't let those stakeouts by TV stations from Boston bother me. I just walk right by, says Jesse Helms, quoted by Fred Barnes. July 30th, Helms engaged in some brief repartee with a Boston reporter who asked about Weld's status. Did you take Latin in school? Helms inquired. Yes, the reporter said. Res ipsa loquitur, Helms shot back and walked on. The phrase means, the thing speaks for itself. Helms follows a simple formula. Implacability equals strength. It works. He can't be buffaloed or ignored. Even acting alone, Helms has enormous sway, as Weld has had to learn. Helms has been a magnetic force on ideology and policy, pulling the entire national debate to the right. Positions he noisily took in Washington, D.C. 2 decades ago, almost alone, are now part of mainstream conservatism. Among them, the balanced budget amendment, a flat tax, school prayer, curbs on food stamps, legislation banning abortion, anti-communism activism, anti-arms control, gay rights, AIDS research. He has paid a price. A 15-foot condom was placed over his house in Arlington, Virginia. In the same article, there's a reference made to the George Bailey test, whatever the hell that is. His reputation as strictly an outside player, harumphing on behalf of one cause after another, may be the received wisdom in Washington about Helms, but it's wrong. Helms calibrates his maneuvering according to how much power he has, and in this case, as Foreign Relations Chairman, he has a great deal. I became convinced early on that the foreign policy apparatus was not operated for the American people, but so the striped pants boys could stick out a pinky, have a cocktail, and sound profound somewhere around the world. When I got to the Senate, I found I was exactly right. He never pulls the rug out from under you. He's the most consistent politician in America, says Thiessen on Helms. You know where he is. You don't have to look under the table, says Dole on Helms. He genuinely doesn't care what liberals in the media think about him, says Bell. This is a source of power, a way of avoiding distraction. Helms coolly ignores the gossip, the chatter, the social scene. Well, let's elect him president then. For him, politics was never a game. He doesn't swap favors. If you want to get Jesse's attention, you knock on his door. You don't put it on paper, says Bob Dole. Reagan was every bit the conviction politician Helms is. He agreed with Helms on nearly everything, including the social issues. Their differences were solely matters of style. Reagan, as candidate and president, was conservatism with a happy face. Helms is conservatism with a stiffened spine. Reagan's success as a conservative leader, however, wouldn't have happened without Helms's bracing him. Well, the Young Americans for Freedom convened in 1960 to decide on its principles in Sharon, Connecticut, at Bill Buckley's estate. They had to be grown-ups and hence a little boring. Most of the radical leftists of the 1960s climbed down off the shoulders of giants, rejecting the wisdom of centuries in favor of what? A communal ad-hocracy driven by the mantra, if it feels good, do it. Or as Oscar Wilde put it so succinctly, in America, the young are always ready to give those who are older than themselves the full benefit of their inexperience. Well, as Rudyard Kipling said about New York City, a pig trough with more mixed stinks than the winter wind can carry away. Giuliani, with his stony face and low entertainment quotient, he is a paradox, an uncharismatic man who relishes the limelight. Well, as In These Times put it, a burst of activity around election time has become a time-honored tradition on the left. Ronnie Duggar's alliance followed the pattern of its predecessors. Initial excitement over the attempt to create a new politics, and then, as it becomes clear that neither the principles nor the strategy had been well thought out or tested in the intellectual arena, a steady decline in interest. Now we've got some very good stuff about arms exports here. Arguing that arms exports are a boon to the U.S. economy, the President, along with the Defense, Commerce, and State Departments, is aggressively promoting the arms industry at every opportunity. The United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, France, and China dominate today's $32 billion global arms trade. The U.S. accounts for 63% of worldwide arms deals already signed for the period between 1994 and 2000. The Clinton administration is phasing out its conversion program, opting instead to help boost the profits of military manufacturers through overseas sales, helping to fan the flames of war instead of promoting stability, says Martha Honey. The U.S. has been a major arms supplier to nations at war. It's a boomerang effect. In Panama, Iraq, Kuwait, Somalia, Haiti, and Bosnia, American forces faced adversaries that had previously received U.S. weapons and military training. The Pentagon and defense contractors then turn around and use the presence of advanced U.S. weapons in foreign arsenals to justify increased spending on new leading-edge weapons back home, so that the U.S. can maintain its military superiority. I see nothing wrong with that personally, but you may beg to differ. Well, I've got to call my computer guy, see if he's got my finger ring. I'm willing to bet that he does not. He hasn't even looked at it yet. Watch, I'll bet you that's what's going to happen. Hello? Did you look at it yet? Nope. Okay. Oh, okay. Take your time. Yes, my name is Francis DiMenno. I dropped off a printer and a towel this morning, and I said I'd call back around 1:30 to see if there was any progress on it. Francis DiMenno. See, that's the way you got to talk to these people. Yes. Okay. Well, I'll give a call tomorrow then. Okay. Bye. No dice. No such luck. They haven't even looked at it yet. How do you like that? If that's not a kick in the keister, then I don't know what is. We're sorry, they say, but we didn't even get to it yet. Won't get to it till tomorrow. When am I going to have the time to pick it up tomorrow? That is the problem. Well, the clock is running out on my ability to finish this in time. I don't know what to do. I guess I'll bravely plow forward, if you don't mind. I'm really worried about that wasp. Where the hell is that wasp? I would love to have the time to eat something. Boy, I'm starving. You can tell from the looks of me. Well, by the early 1980s, Elaine de Benoist had come to see United States economic and cultural power as a greater danger to Europe than Soviet communism and militarism. Better to wear the helmet of a Red Army soldier, he wrote at the time, than to live on a diet of hamburgers in Brooklyn. Vehemently opposed to the capitalist free market, he denounced liberalism as the ideology of an all-encompassing consumer society, which was innately totalitarian by virtue of its compulsion to reduce every aspect of existence to the realm of economic utility. Huh? That's what Marxism does. And he's trying to pin that on liberalism. He excoriated mass consumer society as a kind of soft totalitarianism that air conditions hell and kills the soul. Has he been reading Henry Miller's The Air-Conditioned Nightmare or something? The former white supremacist had become an ardent defender of threatened or minority cultures, of different ways of life. Will the earth be reduced to something homogeneous because of the deculturing and depersonalizing trends for which American imperialism is now the most arrogant vector? He wrote in Telos in 1993. That's a great title for something or other. Arrogant Vector. That's going to be the title of my next show. No, not really, but I do have to take the time to write it down. Or will people find the means for their necessary resistance in their beliefs, traditions, and ways of seeing the world? This is really the decisive question that has been raised at the beginning of the next millennium. A more euphemistic form of bigotry has developed within contemporary neo-fascist circles in Western Europe. that praises diversity while focusing on cultural rather than racial differences. You heard it here first. This proved to be far more serviceable and therefore more pernicious than tarnished ideologies that touted white supremacism. So if you've got nothing else from this presentation, other than that little gem, that little germ, that little nugget, that little pebble of insight, then you still will have been well served. Look for white supremacist movements to move away from a racialist ideology and more towards a culturalist ideology. Now here's another interesting quote, cited by Jeffrey L. Reynolds, spoken by Rian Arman and Levine. By and large, the media and politicians' pronouncements about drugs spread exaggerations, misinformation, and simplistic theories of cause and effect. They taught bad pharmacology, bad sociology, bad criminology, bad urban anthropology, and even bad history. As John O'Neill puts it, speaking of Boston, by the way, have you ever been to Boston? That town is worse than Philadelphia as far as strangers are concerned. Beans aren't the only thing that get baked in Boston. It's so true, isn't it? So that's the thing. You will never be accepted in Boston society, and you will always be accepted in Cambridge society, but it's not Cambridge society that one necessarily wants to be well regarded in. Since they are not exclusive, what's the point, right? Actually, I was sort of nudging my way into Boston society at one time, but then I found out, well, geez, is the game really worth the candle? I'm not really very sociable anyway, so I don't care anymore. However, if you want to invite me to your fancy parties on Friday nights, by all means, contact me, care of the station, and I will deign to make a brief appearance, gaze distractedly about, comment acerbically on the refreshments, and make my much welcomed departure. Where am I quoting from? Why, this is the New Yorker from August 11th. Simon Schama said, "The ideal sovereign was one who understood that the body natural became, in effect, a department of state, so that its dress, deportment, and ritualized display functioned as a symbol of the condition of the body politic. It also required majesty to negotiate artfully between the remote and the familiar, the magical and the commonplace, so that the king or queen could be seen to be both one of us and utterly unlike us. Because of the many repressions committed in her name, it is often forgotten that Victoria was a child of romanticism, who believed all her life that her heart, rather than her head, would offer the surest path to the right conduct. Those who handled her best, Melbourne, Albert, and Disraeli, understood that she needed to be stirred by sentiment as well as prodded by duty in order to act her regal part with conviction. But sentimental sovereignty, as the present queen knows, has its dangers." All this commentary, of course, is pre-Diana. Soon, 1997 AD will refer to after Diana. Now, if Diana had only had the wit to have perished 3 years from now, yeah, whoever dies in the year 2000 is going to have it made, because everything will be dated not only after the year 2000 has passed, but after their deaths as well. Year 2000, that's the year Andy Griffith died. You heard it here first. Well, in American Demographics from August of 1997, it's hypocritical to moan and groan about a lack of discretionary money when so much of what we buy is purely voluntary. We trap ourselves into lives that are money pits. We choose not to have a choice, says Diane Crispell. I could be using this time to bake some delicious biscuits or biscotti instead of sitting in front of this camera. But no, actually, biscotti is like a 1.5 hour chore, and I don't really have an hour and a half to do it. More's the pity. I mean, I could probably fashion the loaves in that time period. Now here's the clue to making good biscotti. You preheat the oven, but don't, whatever you do, put the pan in the oven, because if you do that, then when you put the biscotti dough on the heated pan, it will instantly burn. You want to keep the pan cold. Put the pan in the freezer, or as Bill Cosby would put it, put the pan in the freezer. Man, he's really riding that ability of his to sound like a spaz into a $1 million career. Did you know that he's one of the richest men in showbiz? Of course, he's been at it for so much longer than virtually anybody else. What if Lenny Bruce had lived and Bill Cosby had died? Wow, what a world, huh? It would be Bill Cosby who's the cult figure. Amway in non-line item Sweetheart Asian deal. Ah yes, our friends at Amway. This is cited in U.S. News and World Report of August 18th. Like I say, news is pretty thin in August. Rats can last 16 days without eating, 17 days without sleep. Not me. I can't last 17 hours without sleep. Human cells divide 80 or 90 times, then stop. Although they can live for years, these aged cells no longer do their job properly and create enzymes that can damage proteins such as skin collagen. How do you keep that youthful look? Well, I was in a hyperbaric chamber for 20 years. Oh, I see. Reducing daily food intake by 40%, rats lived 30% longer. Well, I can already expect to live to be age 90, so 30% of that is, let's see, 27 more years. So I could live to be 117? That'd be cool. My grandfather's like 96 years old. Can you imagine? 96 years old. Which means I must be healthy as an ox. I will probably long outlive all of my contemporaries. Yep, well, we're going page after page, and there's very little in the way of political stuff here. Teddy Kennedy, enough demons to give an exorcist tenure, says Abbott Combs. See, I copy these things down. They're not always timely. They may be of historical interest, but also they're interesting turns of phrase. I am very interested in good writing, and worldly wise men will say there is something arbitrary about 100 days, but ever since JFK, we all do it to guide us along the twisting way of public affairs, was said in The Spectator of August 15th. A Russian prince once observed that between the revolution and the firing squad, there is always time for a bottle of champagne. Again in The Spectator of August 2nd. The history of the world is one of single-minded people getting what they want, says Jenny McCartney. Yes, it is so. The Duke of Wellington generally affected to consider most journalists and nearly all newspapers as troublesome mischief makers and to be, as far as possible, ignored, but later conceded he had committed a great error in not paying more attention to the press and in not securing a portion of it on his side and getting good writers into his employment. But he never thought it necessary to do so and was now, in 1831, convinced what a great mistake it was. Well, my heart bleeds for you, Dookie. The German businessman recently on a trip to the United States, according to the Weekly Standard of August 18th. His host walked him around downtown Washington, D.C. "You have the most beautiful prostitutes here, so well dressed," he had noticed. He had noticed throngs of women gathered on the sidewalk outside their office buildings, smoking. In Boston, they love their losers. If you lose selfishly, but do it with a certain blasé style, they love you all the more. And if you claim virtue while you're at it, well then, you're William Weld, looking for Beantown sainthood. At least since the Houston Convention of 1992, the Republican Party has feared the disdain of the world's Welds. And that is true, but they don't fear it enough to short-circuit Jesse Helms. Today, Hollywood is what Wall Street was in the 1980s or Washington, D.C. was in the 1970s. The land of milk and honey, the creamy center of the American pie. Hollywood movies, like television shows, are less a form of art than multi-million-dollar launching platforms for a mind-numbing variety of products, from the film itself to cable rights to foreign rights to the underlying value of theater chains and TV networks, to school lunchboxes, TV T-shirts, and the commercial products featured or advertised in the shows, from Fruitopia to Reebok to IBM on up. Talent agencies are Hollywood's investment banks. Hollywood's the place to be, apparently. Perhaps the most outstanding feature of the moment is that the lines between fact and fiction, between personal experience and televised narratives and characters, have ceased, not to exist, of course, but to serve as a useful tool in interpreting everyday American reality. After 6 hours of daily exposure to television, beginning at birth, it is a little wonder that the characters and storylines have become real to us, shaping our habits and expectations with a thoroughness that the fathers of the medieval church would have envied. The conditions of response to the performer are analogous to those in a primary group. The most remote and illustrious men are met as if they were in a circle of one's peers, says Horton and Wool, cited 1955. And in a public sphere made up of billion-dollar summer movies, celebrity trials, political spectaculars, and other broadcast narratives, minutely shaped and focus grouped and polled and linked to overarching themes and telling personal moments, Hollywood has become our true center of cultural gravity, the fixed point around which the rest of American life revolves. I think I might be in the wrong business here. In today's literate culture, reading and writing are tools of an elite. The rest of America watches television. This is David Samuels, cited in the Weekly Standard of August 18th. While cultural differences among Hollywood, Washington, and New York still exist, what seems most interesting about the present moment is the degree to which the once enormous differences in culture, style, and tone among the capital cities of our mediated republic have blurred together, lost in the common fog of sound bites and formulas produced by the same increasingly homogeneous group of people, well-educated, rich, conventionally liberal in their politics, increasingly cut off from the lives of people unlike themselves. The view of the public alternating between abject worship of the famous and the ferocious desire to see them fall. Hollywood shows the division between a distant elite that produces and manipulates images and the unseen mass audience that passively consumes them. As Clifford Geertz put it in Nagara, the theater state in 19th century Bali, published in 1980. Clifford Geertz, I think he's a Dutch underground cartoonist as well. The expressive nature of the Balinese state was apparent through the whole of its known history, for it was always pointed not towards tyranny, whose systematic concentration of power it was incompetent to effect, and not even very methodically towards government, but rather towards spectacle, towards ceremony, toward the public dramatization of the ruling obsessions of Balinese culture, social inequality and status, pride. It was a theater state in which the kings and princes were the impresarios, the priests the directors, and the peasants the supporting cast, stage crew, and audience. The stupendous cremations, tooth fillings, temple dedications, pilgrimages, and blood sacrifices, mobilizing hundreds and even thousands of people and great quantities of wealth, were not means to political ends. They were the ends themselves. They were what the state was for. The idea of a social order devoted to the production of expressive ritual imagery for a mass audience seems like common sense. Or as David A. Price puts it, we love the web because it's futuristic. It's the solitary, blessed development that lets us feel kinship with the Jetsons. How different a world this is than from what it was some 30 years ago, 1968. There are 3 guys running for sheriff of the United States and no one for president, says David Lesher. Cited in the very same, very interesting issue of the Weekly Standard. See, the Weekly Standard isn't such a bad magazine. It's got interesting social commentary. August 18th, 1997, Weekly Standard. But, they are so predictable in some fashions, and yet they have such good writing on occasion that it makes it difficult to dismiss them totally. And not many libraries seem to get the Weekly Standard. Libraries like to have complete runs of magazines. If they didn't jump on it back in '94 when the magazine began, then they might be reluctant to do so now after 3 years. Some young people enter the workforce and fiscal reality tempers their chaotic liberalism, says Kenneth Lee. Ain't it the truth? Ain't it the truth? You know it's the truth. You know I'm not just whistling Dixie. Well, at this point, I should stop because I have to get ready for work, but there's still 13 minutes left. What to do? And I got to piss like crazy, too. Well, maybe I'll just try to plow through just a little more of this. That will benefit me and you. And we'll be getting closer and closer to contemporaneity in this commentary. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here, but very little of it has to do with politics. However, I did find one little gem. And judging from the citation, are we still in the Weekly Standard? Wow. No. American Enterprise from September, October of 1997. Again, not a bad magazine. It doesn't always have all that much good in it, but the September, October issue is like crammed full of great stuff. So, go figure. The November issue just came out. Okay. I think we can probably wind this down with the great television commentary that perhaps is in order at this time. Of course, this commentary was supposed to be about slick, and what could possibly be more slick than television? Well, There's a great deal of stuff here. Oh, it's all about the Simpsons, huh? We become good, says Fred Turner, by acting as if we were good. Chekhov said much the same thing. Our basic instincts are good in themselves, but incomplete. Fantasy can be noble. Imagination is not necessarily at war with moral goodness. We can learn to interpret stories, legitimately extract any message, however corrupt or self-serving, from a narrative. The past is relevant to the present and may even be the vital gateway to a liberating perspective. Sometimes it is the present, its habits, its fashions, that shackles us and destroys our freedoms. Stories are naturally moral. Any good story has a central figure with whom we can identify, a quest worth achieving, obstacles that must be overcome, and a conclusion satisfying to our basic human sense of rightness, even if it is tragic. Morality and virtue are not parochial Western notions. They are the achievement and property of the whole human race. Courage, cheerfulness, trust, and optimism are virtues. One does not need to prove one's seriousness and moral probity by paralyzed caution, gloom, cynicism, and pessimism. The TV talk show morality, in which it is tyrannous to disapprove of any sincere impulse, even if it is selfish and perverse. In the heat of the moment, we are not really free to do anything other than what our impulses prompt us to do. But over time, we can deliberately train and ingrain habits and customs which can radically change what those impulses will be. This is our true freedom. Or as Marcus Aurelius put it, your mind will be like its habitual thoughts, for the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And as Samuel Butler put it, the greatest pleasure of a dog is that you may make a fool of yourself with him, and not only will he not scold you, but he will make a fool of himself too. Going back to Fred Turner, every human child feels himself at first to be an animal, barely able to control himself, a small, clumsy creature among gigantic yet graceful adults, awkward and inarticulate, and nevertheless expected to play the role of a human being. Our cultural vitality comes out of our children's continual re-encounter with storytelling tradition. Dogs are, in most mythologies, central to the story of how we changed from unreflecting animal to troubled, soul-burdened, world-shaping human being. Being on a set is like joining a summer camp musical production, says Ben Stein. Television can make you feel, but it can't make you think, says Mark Stein. Television is for being on, not looking at, said Noel Coward. Instead of the global village, the world that beckons us now is more like a global housing project, an electronic Cabrini Green in which we are all barricaded into our customized ghettos. Sadly, there are now so many of us commentating that there's hardly anyone left to do anything for the rest of us to comment on. Hollywood movie makers endlessly raid the vaults of 60s and 70s TV because these are the last artifacts of a shared popular culture, of a popular culture. Novels, good or bad, are much as they ever were, same as with the theater. So what in the end has TV changed? Only the entire vernacular of public debate. On the small screen, the big picture has a hard time squeezing in. The poet should seize the particular, and he should, if there be anything sound in it, thus represent the universal, said Goethe. That is to say, most of us find it hard to become exercised over generalities, but if you root those giant issues in specific individuals and telling details, you can relate to them. It's a principle that drives most movies, plays, and novels. Particularization is an essential funnel to feeling, says Broadway conductor Layman Engel. News is from Mars. TV is from Venus. This is all Mark Stein. NBC's Olympics. No hard facts, no foreigners, just soft lifestyle features that could just as easily have been recorded months ago. Increasingly, special reports are underlaid, like any drama, with incidental, emotionally manipulative music. My friend Steve Iskowitz said that every time he hears that da 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 da, what he hears is, "We will never tell you the truth." So that's kind of interesting. Marginally, anyway. I smell something burning. That's a terrifying smell. It smells like hair burning or something. Could it be this plug? What is that smell? Oh, God. There's something burning. Oh, God. Oh. You know what? This is so weird. Some wasps got caught in one of those powerful arc lights that we have, and they burned to a crisp. And now we have fried wasps in the lamp. God, it's a good thing I smelled that. That would have been like a catastrophe if I had left that light on and those things had caught on fire. The whole house would have burned down. All because of some stupid fucking wasps getting stuck in the lamp. Oh, great. Ugh. So anyway, that solves the mystery of what happened to the wasps. Maybe I should spray some stuff around. I bet you these things will taste good, but they're a little too well done for my taste. God, you gotta be careful with those arc lamps. Can you imagine the whole house catching on fire because some wasps got stuck in the lamp? I gotta spray something to get rid of that smell. Or else my girlfriend will be terrified when she comes in and smells that god-awful aroma of burning insects. Wow. Too much, man. We don't have any sprays. Well, geez, there's nothing to spray around that would get rid of that awful smell. Well, maybe it'll dissipate by the time she gets home. There's gotta be something. Well, anyway, I guess I'll wind this down. Politics is uniquely craven in its attachment to television. Yet radio, newspapers, telephone calls, almost anything energizes the audience more than television. It's peachy for sitcoms and cop shows, but it's a passive medium, which is why the more our political parties package themselves for TV, the fewer people vote. By colluding with TV's sentimentalizing of the great issues, politicians are turning politics into the same kind of furtive fringe activity as the sock mop infomercial and the porno channel, says Michael Stein. TV itself erodes American virtues. TV's destructive force, says Michael Medved, lies in the medium, not the message. It is the inescapable essence of television that undermines the principles most parents strive to pass on to their kids. When consumed in the American pattern of several hours each day, TV inevitably promotes impatience, self-pity, and superficiality. No teacher can reproduce the manic energy or protean transformations of the tube. The very structure of televised entertainment, action-packed half hours, undercuts habits of deferred gratification and long-term perspective. Of course, commercials foster peevish and unfulfilled desire suffered by so many viewers. The purpose of these cunningly crafted messages is to stimulate impatience. If advertising does its job effectively, it will leave the mass audience with a perpetual attitude of unquenchable yearning for a never-ending succession of alluring new products. Hello? Oh, I'm doing okay. No, they're not going to have it ready until tomorrow. I got to tell you something about that big lamp in the corner. Some wasps got stuck in it and burned to a crisp. And I smelled it, and I cleaned them out of there. But there's a slight lingering aroma, so if you smell it, don't become too concerned because it was just the wasps getting stuck in the arc lamp. The one in the corner, the big standing lamp. Okay? Yes, I turned it off. Maybe I'll unplug it too. Okay, dear. There's wasps in the house and they're attracted to the light and they got stuck in the lamp. It is. Okay, dear? I'll talk to you soon. Love you. Well, I'm glad you called, so... Anyway, this ends our episode.